Good morning. Thank you for joining me this morning to the second in the Supply Ready program, Fit to Bid program webinars. Those who join me on the first one, gave some kind of outline around tendering. Now we're going to go into a little bit more detail. It's very tempting now to do a couple of other things while you're doing this, but try for the next hour. There is quite a lot of information, and there is a couple of bits that are interactive where I'd like you to just respond to a couple of questions in the chat. So if you can, unless really urgent, just put things to the side and let's just spend the next hour going through things which I'm hoping will be of real benefit to you. So just quickly about myself. If you're here last month, you'll have heard this before. I'm Alan Brown. I've over 10 years experience working within the public sector and delivering to the government at all levels, from local authorities to national contracts. A good chunk of that time was with Capita, getting involved in bids and rebids. And now I run my own business as well, and I've won contracts with local authorities, so I do understand this because I've had to do it myself. And now we've partnered with Brandon, we're based in the north of England, and to deliver this Fit to Bid program in the north. And we run a consultancy that works with companies like yours to get them to be more successful and more knowledgeable and equipped with the tools to successfully enter the public sector. So, just to remind you what Brandon are. So Brandon are a business support consultancy. They work with local authorities and growth hubs and with the chambers and some university and entrepreneur hubs. And they deliver growth services, of which Fit to Bid is one. And these business support programs are designed to build community wealth, which is an imperative within all local authorities. It is expected that they try and keep the wealth in the community is another way of putting that. So it's important, I think, with all this, and we're going to go into some detail and things, and some things might appear complex or overwhelming. The fact is, local authorities need businesses like yours to deliver the services that they have. And you have, as I would say, a seat at the table. And the idea of Fit to Bid is to make it clear that you do have a seat at the table, and they welcome bids and love giving business to smaller companies. But you have to understand the process. You have to understand how this works. It is a sales program. You are selling to the government at local level, but it's a different kind of sale than you might be used to with your commercial customers, which is the reason why we go into this detail. So as I said, we assist entrepreneurs, business owners to start and grow their businesses in the UK and overseas. But Fit to Bid is designed for within this local, within Hillingdon, so how you can win business within your area. So there's two interactive online workshops, of which this is a second. And they are, as I said, they're based on principles of best practice and excellence in selling overall, but specifically honed towards the public sector, because like I said, it is slightly different than what you might be used to. So we're going to cover these principal elements. We covered some of this in the first one, which was, why do organizations go to tender, what to look for, how to get the basics right, and what makes up a winning bid. And this is important. Golden rules, which we talked about last time, we'll talk about again, what we view the golden rules to be, understanding the questions, confirming your solution, what the selling points of what type of solution, what problem do you solve, essentially. How do you articulate that? How do you provide compelling evidence? The evidence is really important. It's no good just to say, we do this, we have done this. Then you have to show that you've done it and evidence it in such a way that it's a really compelling argument that they should look at your company, what differentiates you. And we'll go into some of that later on. About researching your client with local authorities, it's actually quite straightforward to research because almost everything you need to know is on their website. And then about writing bespoke, accurate, clear, and concise bid response. And by the end of this hour, I don't expect to be an expert, but you'll have more understanding of how this process works and how you can make it work to your advantage. So again, you've seen this last time. This is our overall Fit to Bid methodology. So the important elements here to really pull out are how to engage with procurement, departments. We talked about that, and we give some guidance and help on that through the Meet the Buyer events, which are at the other end. But there's also, you'll have it, and if you haven't completed it yet, then I really compel you to do this, which is to build your online bid capability assessment. It's like just a questionnaire, and you get a simple report from it. But that gives us a really good idea of where you are in the process, how adept you are, how knowledgeable you are, how skilled you are. And then let's look at the areas where you might need some support or help, guidance, or training. It's about 2-3 minutes out of your day, but it's a really powerful tool. And that's also taken into the one-to-ones that you have, where we talk about a bespoke solution for your company. So we talk about bidding skills, which we're talking about in the last one. We talk about sales enablement, which is a lot of what we're talking about today, and tender advice. And then ultimately there's the Meet the Buyer events, where you can meet tier 1, tier 2 buyers and procurement department from your local authority, which is an incredible resource you'll have later in the program. So that's the overall methodology. We have what we call embedded learning. There is a YouTube channel for Branddoing, where all our previous webinars for Fit to Bid and other programs are all on there. It's a great resource. So you'll be able to return to this one, which will go up on YouTube in the next few days. But you can also hop back to the previous ones you've done and other areas if there's something you're interested in. But it's a great resource. You can return to this at any point. So the benefits of the program is said an assessment of your bid writing skills, where you are right now. An honest appraisal of where you are and what your understanding is. And that just gives us an idea where we need to support you. And it's a process. It's a process and it's a learned skill. It's something you get better at. I didn't start by being good at this. I got better at it by practice. And we aim to provide you with the skills and knowledge to implement best practice standards. And some of those things we'll talk about here, but some of the basic things are about answering the right question or questions in the right way, about having empathy with the buyer, etc., which are things we referred to in the previous webinar. You have 2 face-to-face Meet the Buyer events, which you mentioned, which are an incredible resource, and access to 2 confidential one-to-one tender advice sessions. So just to go into that just briefly, the purpose of them and what you'll get out of them is something talking about your business. A lot of what we're talking about here, understandably, because we have a varied audience, is quite general, as it has to be. But those one-to-ones are very specific to you, what your value offering is and what your needs are and what you offer, etc., and what we can do to support you. Because we want you all to be successful. That's the basis of this. We want you to be successful. And these one-to-ones which are done face-to-face, are incredibly valuable to get us to understand what it is that you need, where you are now, and what we can do to support you. We give assistance in submitting expressions of interest, which is the very first stage for any tender. How do you submit that expression of interest, which is generally done online? And then we support you with the writing. And then there's something called a complete tender business model canvas, which effectively is a one-pager about your business and what you offer, what you offer as a value proposition, and how you simply evidence that. It's a really incredibly strong document because you can apply that then to all your tenders, and that will be as a result of the one-to-ones and the work we do with you. Design your value proposition. So it's designed for procurement. As I said before, it is a sales process like any sale, but it's different. The way they look at the value you offer is different than a private commercial company would look at it. Generally speaking, they're looking for a problem to be solved. And remember, they're spending public money, so they're very, very cautious, and they need to understand how that money is being spent. I say to people all the time, if they're looking at this, you have 2 hats on. You have your hat on as a business, where you want to win business and you want to be successful and you want to be profitable, increase your revenue, etc. But the other side is, of course, we're all taxpayers. We all pay council tax, and you want to believe that the local authorities and national government, as much as possible, are spending your money correctly. And while that's a really big subject, which I don't want to get into in detail, but from a local authority point of view, you can, if you offer a really good solution where you are delivering really good value, then obviously you are profiting as a business, but you're also delivering a service of value where the money's being spent well in your local area. It's something worth bearing in mind. There is constant engagement throughout the program. It's not like we just say, okay, you have your one-to-one, thank you, there's a sheet, get on with it. No, we constantly support you. And there's regular and ongoing feedback. So it is a real partnership with you while you're part of the program to make you stronger. And as the phrase says, to make you fit to bid, to make you fit and strong to enter the process. So very quickly, in part one, we talked about why organizations go to tender. We talked about some things we mentioned, like solving a problem and how money is spent, what they look for, which generally speaking is they need to understand what you can offer them, getting the basics right about how you approach this entire process, how you provide the information that's needed, making sure that you answer questions correctly. So it says understanding questions and objectives. Yeah, there'll be questions. You have to answer the questions exactly. And it sounds really basic, but actually it's a really big deal to make sure that the question is asked, you answer clearly. And then what the objectives, what is it, what's the big picture? What is it that the local authority is trying to achieve? And how can you help that? And how can you articulate in your submission response, in your tender response, how can you articulate how what you're offering benefits that bigger picture? And how you do that is by researching the client. Again, compared to the commercial world where researching a potential customer can be quite tough, other than what they publish themselves, for the public sector, almost everything is online. So you can research their values, you can see what's in their pipeline, you can see what their plans are for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on what it is. This is really valuable information, which you can then pull into your response where appropriate. So a winning bid, principal elements of, right? So we showed this graphic on the last month. So winning bid, right price, and follows the golden rules, which we'll go into. And we'll also talk about what the right price is. So it directly answers the questions. It shows understanding of broader needs and objectives. It demonstrates a credible, competent solution. It confirms the benefits to the client. It includes evidence to support and convince, and it's written leanly, clearly, and precisely. Now, in the last webinar, we covered 1 and 2, whereas in this one, we're going to cover 3, 4, 5, and 6 in more detail. So what's the main golden rule? There are several golden rules, but this effectively is the biggest one. And the reason why we've done this analogy with the lady there climbing a mountain is that you wouldn't look to climb a mountain without, or you just wouldn't decide one day, I'm going to go and do that. You'd prepare, you'd plan, you'd make sure you know what you're doing, where, why, you have the right tools to do it. And we're saying to approach this process, you need to do the same. You need to plan, you need to understand, you need to do things like you're doing now, which is a very proactive thing that you're doing to learn about the process to your benefit, and then how do you apply it to your company. So that's the reason why we use that kind of broad analogy there with the mountain climber. But it's not that it's a mountain to climb necessarily. I don't want to take the analogy that far, but just that you need to prepare in order to do it. So the how you do that is the who, what, where, when, why. And these are the elements that you use in order to respond to a tender. A tender will have a whole load of documentation, and they will ask questions, and I'll explain what they're after. And then it's a case of, well, how do you get this across? So how you get this across is you complete the description of how you'll execute the required work, whatever it is, the service, the product, etc. And you need to cover the next 5 elements in order to show that how, and it must be substantiated. You can't just say something. We do this, we will do that, or we use this process. So it's like, we will do that. Have you done it before? Can you evidence how you've done it before? We do it in this way. What are the benefits of you doing that way? So benefits, not features. So the who, what, where, when, why. So who? You. Do you work with a partner company? Do you work with a subcontractor? Sometimes the answers can be very complex. You just have to be really, really clear. Specify the roles. It can be really useful, and some tenders ask for this, to talk about the personnel. They might want, they'll say CVs. What they actually really want is a relevant experience. We sometimes call them pen portraits. So the individuals who are going to deliver, what's their relevant experience? It can be, if it's slightly more complex, it's good to supply an org chart of how it's going to work, depending on how complex and how many people are involved in the questions they ask. But certainly talk about the roles and the people involved. Put names on them, make it real, bring it to life. And who is the overall process owner? Who runs this whole thing? Who's their point of contact? The what. So what's your approach? What steps will you take, and what processes do you involve, and what methods do you use to deliver whatever the product or the service is. What materials do you use? And materials could be anything from, if it's a product, it could be about your supply chain and what you actually use to build something. But it can also be materials like what training materials, if you're a training company, or what things do you give to your potential clients? What equipment to use, if that's appropriate. What tools do you use? And again, tools can be hard tools or it could be soft tools. PowerPoint's a tool, just as an example. So we're using PowerPoint here as a tool. We're using Zoom as a tool to deliver this. And then one of the things that's a real key thing is SLA, service level agreements. And sometimes they might have KPIs, which are key performance indicators. So what can you measure? What can you provide throughout what you do, evidence what you do, and how will it be measured to show that you're doing it right? They may well, in the tender, actually have clear, we want this information. But if they don't, it's always good to explain, we will do this and we will measure it, and we can evidence throughout the period of the contract, let's say over these next 2 years, 3 years, we will show you how our progress is, as an example. And how will you do that? How you present that? Will you do it on a simple Excel spreadsheet? Will you do it in Power BI? Will you do any number of things, but you need to look at that and how you do it. When? What's your schedule for delivery? How are you going to work? Now, part of that will be affected by the information in the description of the tender, which you really must look at tight. There's no point offering a schedule that's out of sync with what they might have described. It might not be a description, but if there is a description timeline, then obviously you're expected to stick to it. What milestones are there? If there are specific, or what milestones would you put in? What frequency? What are the dates? What's the time and deliverables and requirements? All these kind of things is all about the when, about how you deliver throughout the period of that contract. Say it is something delivery, it's something you're a company, for example, that makes uniforms, nurses' uniforms, and that is interesting, it's handled regionally, not nationally. And how would you do that? But if it's a service, let's say it's a training system, then how does that work over, say, a year? How often, what times, what locations, etc. So then we get on to same locations. Where? What's the work location? Where does the work take place? What facilities or sites do you use in order to deliver this? What are your team member facilities for your own team? How does that operate? Is it geographic? In other words, is it something it's very localized, or is it something actually distribute all over the country, depending on what it is that you're doing? Include maps, show the locations. As I said before, when we were talking about the who, bring this to life. Bring it to life as much as possible so people can visualize what you're doing and they understand that you're actually making this really clear what you provide. And along with that, show the customer location, so that the client, the customer, understands how this works with them. Just give them as much information as possible where relevant. And then the why. So this is where it gets really, really key. What's your rationale behind the approach that you've chosen to take? What's the purpose of the specific tasks that you've broken this down into? And what's your service quality? How do you show your service quality? Why do you do it that way? Link to evidence as to why this is the best approach, because we've done this in the past and the result was. And in that, you can also include testimonials and case studies, which are incredibly powerful. So testimonials obviously come from third parties, from customers, whereas case studies are things you put yourself. Sometimes you can mix the two slightly, but evidence your why. So it's not just an approach, it's why you're doing it this way. And link that to benefits and value. So as everybody knows, I think everybody's heard, in sales of all types, it's not about features. It's not about what you do. It's about why you do it. What's the benefit? What problem does it solve? What value does it offer to the client? In this case, a local authority. What does it do that makes it better for them? And how does that work with their bigger picture and what things they're trying to achieve? Now, how much that shows, it looks a lot. The fact is, normally when you're describing what you do, you actually hit a lot of these, you'll find. But in the response process, you just have to go into a lot more detail. You just have to make it really explicit. So it's a discipline, really. None of this should be a surprise to you in talking about your business and what you do and why you do it. It's articulated in a way that is really compelling. Okay, what's your USP? What's your unique selling point? And it's a fact that unique is a word that's used too casually. You ask businesses, and I've asked this question myself, what makes you unique? And they say, well, because we're fantastic at customer service. Unfortunately, that's not a USP. And often in a crowded market, a genuine USP is very, very hard to define. So there are other ways of differentiating yourself. Is how you approach a standard feature, standard procedure. What is it that you do that makes it more efficient? What is it you do makes it more in line with what the client is after? Or even is how do you articulate? Do you articulate it better than one of your competitors to say really, really clear? Because we've studied, for example, Hillingdon, and we know what they're after. And our procedure, we can articulate that this really works with the values of Hillingdon and what they're trying to achieve. And that starts to differentiate itself. So what are the advantages of working with you over somebody else? What elements of your solution approach that meet those customer requirements better than your competition? And sometimes, like I said, it's about how it's articulated. You and a competitor might be very, very similar products, similar prices at similar regions. But if you articulate it better, that's the differentiator. So we'll come back to benefits, golden rule, so what? That's what you should look at. Every single thing that you write down is before you shout at everybody, read it or get somebody else. Sometimes a third pair of eyes or a second pair of eyes is really useful. So what? Well, that's nice, but what does that mean? So the phrase that I was drilled into me when I was in sales many years ago is which means that. So you say something, you do something, we do this, which means that. You don't necessarily have to use those words, but that's what should be in, which means that, and then you're into a benefit, not a feature. So I'm going to do it really simple. We use this machine, which means that, right? And that's what I mean. We follow this process. We work out of this location, we do it, etc. We employ these kind of people with these qualifications, which means that, and that means, well, how does that benefit the client? That's how you get around so what. I have seen so many sales presentations that fail this. So it's a really, really key thing. If you can get this right, it could differentiate you massively from somebody else who's responding to the same tender or your sales process in general. So I've spoken a lot, just to have a little break now. In the chat, could you just consider putting what benefits does your solution have, and how can you explain the value added? There's no wrong answers in this. The idea is to get you just to think. So have a think about your own business and what you do and your clients. So what's the benefit? What benefit does your solution have? Maybe with a view to the local authority, but if not, just any of your customers. And how can you explain the value added in a really succinct way if possible? So I'm just going to stay quiet for a couple of minutes, have a drink of water, while you have a think about that. And then put something in the chat if you don't mind. Cost effective because you have low overheads, Mark. Absolutely right. So you might be typing something else. So I'm cost effective because I have low overheads, which means that we're able to offer X, and that's the next part of it. But actually, yeah, that's a start. You're very cost effective. So you can offer a very cost effective solution because you have low overheads. And the benefit of that, there might be other things besides just the cost. You have low overheads because you're very efficient, those efficiencies, etc. So there's things, but absolutely right. That's the right kind of way of thinking. Anybody else? I mean, what's more important than, oh, there we go. Due to an overwhelming group of young people with special education, this will be my target audience for delivering educational supporting services. Yeah, so there's an overwhelming group of young people with this will be my targets for delivering educational supports. Yeah, which means that, and what's the benefit of with those with actually I do know something about when you get to send children, it's quite complex, isn't it, Tina? And that's a huge subject. But I imagine in a local area there will be in Hillingdon they will have a send policy. So how does you doing that? Which means that fits in precisely with the aims for send children in this region over the next 2-3 years, as an example. Okay, Vipara specialist staff, and I hope I've said pronounced your name correctly. My apologies if I haven't. Specialist staff, which means I'm going to target the best products to the correct market, which means that local, absolutely. But what's the benefits of being local? I've been local to Hillingdon for many times, so I understand the borough's needs. Yeah, and then give an example of what those boroughs needs. An example of, we offer a streaming solution which solves admin time through one invoice, which means that is that cost, is it efficiency, etc. Improves the indirect procurement process, reducing licensing costs, saving more than 1 million for our existing client with our solution. Fantastic. We use a CNC machine to manufacture, which means that our products are produced with precision and means there are fewer issues and call-outs. That's going back to my engineering days years ago and CNC machines. But absolutely, yeah, that's got our inventory stock means that we can furnish the majority of orders without delay, and with a super logistics setup, we can deliver UK-wide next day. Yeah, so you can see these are all really good. Everything, all those, like I said, there's no right or wrong. It's just just getting into the headspace that this is how you need to think about what you're doing. And the thing is, you're doing this every day. This is just a slightly more disciplined approach. So thank you very much for all those entries in the chat there. Fantastic. So examples of primary benefits. I'm not going to go through every one of these. I'm conscious of time. We've got quite a lot to get through. But some of these are kind of obvious, but this is what they want to see. Just because it's obvious doesn't mean you don't include that in your response. Don't assume it's a given. Make it clear. So it could be, it saves management time, it reduces or eliminates cost, it reduces risk, depending on what the risk is. If the risk isn't part of it, then that might not be the right thing to put in. Improves staff morale, well-being, etc. Social value, that is a really, really big deal. Increases turnover. Whereas, that might be slightly different working in a local authority, it's still important. It improves margins, increases productivity, reduces waste, enhances image, reduces environmental impact. That's a huge thing. So there is a thing called ESG, which many of them I'm sure have heard of, environmental and social governance, which is about reducing the impact, companies' impact on the environment mainly, and the social elements of the local area. ESG is a really big thing, and we could do a whole webinar just on ESG, but it's very important. If you can do anything that benefits that. Decreases staff turnover. Again, that tends to be a well-being thing, etc. So they're all, and there are lots of others, but these are really good examples of the benefits that you bring, and that you need to articulate about where appropriate. It won't be all of these, it'll be some of these, but where they are appropriate, you highlight them. So you try to attach, if I can just see the screen, probably try to attach something else to benefits. Yeah, a method for measuring, quantifying quantification gives. Right. So what quantify gives is a greater perception of value. If you can put metrics around what you do. So we improve staff morale. That leads to lower staff turnover. What's the benefits of lower staff turnover? It isn't just for the people, though. That's incredibly important. There's a huge cost connected to recruiting and training people, as an example. And if you can show figures around that, I might not have chosen the best example for this, but the fact of the matter is, if you can show figures around it and metrics around it, how you can improve something, then there are all the other direct or indirect benefits. Anything that you can put metrics on. Remember, come back to this about two hats. They're spending your money. They're spending our money. And therefore, they want to be able to show that they're doing the best job they can. And the best way of showing that is to have metrics. So when you say, look, we will do this, and we can do this in this particular time, and we can show you. The only guidance, just a little guidance on that, is if you say you can do something, remember this, they will expect you to. So if you say you can measure something, make sure you can, because they will genuinely, if they build it into the expecting, so right, okay, you said you can measure this, so expect it. So be clear on what's actually possible and practical and deliverable. So the golden rule, what you're trying to do in all of this is get them to trust what you're saying and believe in. People buy what they believe in. We all do this. We're all consumers. We all do that. And compelling evidence is absolutely critical. That compelling evidence can be testimonies, like I said, or it can be very, very clear case studies. Oh, thank you. Just from, yeah, we efficiently reclaim the unemployed and place them back into sustainable. Yeah, I missed that one. Yeah, that's very, very good. Absolutely. And then you can do the next stage is, which means that, and it's better for the community, etc. So thank you for that. But yeah, people buy what they believe in. We all do it. And the more evidence there is, it's critical to your argument. So you need to show, well, it's no good to say, well, we do this. or we have done this, then where have you done it? How can you show what are the benefits, and how does that benefit translate to your local authority? How would that benefit them if you did the same thing or something very, very similar? There's no point sending them a case study for something that's a completely different product, totally different service. It might make you look really, really good, but if it's not relevant to what you're responding to, it doesn't make any sense. It will just confuse the issue. So relevance is really important. So what's your story? This sometimes stumps people. Your story is important as a business and as a person. So if asked, what would your clients say about you? And what would you want them to say? I mean, you can put examples in the chat if you'd like, but you don't have to. It's more something to think about, that if somebody independently went to your clients now and said, what are your thoughts are, or what words come to mind when asked about your business, your company, you as a person, what would they say? What do you think they would say? And what would you want them to say? And hopefully those two would be very, very similar. You know, we all know we have to look after our clients and treat them well, onboard them, etc., and deliver a service of excellence. But what's your story? How is it that you have got to the position you've got to? And how can you translate across in your bid response that your current customers think this of you because of XYZ, because of the service we have, which means that we can offer that to you, and this is the benefit that you would get from the fact that we've built up this reputation over a period of time. But it's not just a reputation; it's what we can evidence, and this reputation backs up has been created by the work that we've done. If that makes sense. And how do you make what you say more believable? How to back up your word? Now, this is an exercise. This is a slightly tougher one. Now, have a think about this and feel free to put some things in the chat. But like I said, these exercises are more about you thinking than anything else. So how do you make what you say more believable? How do you back up your words? So give that a little thought. And if you want to put some examples in the chat, say it's a slightly tougher question than the previous one, just give that some thought for a couple of minutes. You can, yes, Mark, absolutely. You can show examples of your previous completed projects. Yeah. And if they, especially if they, so before, if they apply, you know, they're relevant to what we're talking about. Absolutely. I mean, it's just, it's perfect. And it doesn't have to just be writing. If you can put in pictures and diagrams, all these things, all things that doesn't matter. Photographs, if it's appropriate, depending on what it is, are a fabulous testimonials. Exactly. You know, testimonials are incredibly strong. Again, trying to make sure they're relevant. But you know, testimonials show, they back up your words. This is what you're saying, isn't it? You know, when you look at people, you know, I don't know, you're looking to book a hotel room, then you might go into TripAdvisor example and see testimonials. And if a majority of the testimonials or the others are positive, there might be the negative one. Yeah, but actually, that's a very, very good point, Lily. When necessary, or when appropriate, policies, especially if they're policies based upon some kind of certification you have to go through, say ISO 9001, for example. External accreditation, exactly, there you go, Cheryl. Just as I was saying, external accreditation and quality standards, absolutely. On some areas, they're absolutely essential. Second, yeah, testimonials, social media reviews, podcasts and interviews, seminars. Yeah, you can't go in with everything, but you take out bits that are really, really relevant. So you can't say, for example, that I've appeared on this podcast, but if you can take a line from that and say, this was the feedback you got, it all has to be relevant. But certainly testimonials, case studies, anything you can use to evidence physical. And quite right, as you say, sometimes external accreditation and quality standards, absolutely agree with you. Depending on what it is, that's actually a key thing, because it's a process you have to go through. It's very, very important. So thank you for all those really, really good responses. And Sam, we've saved 1 million for existing client where they'd managed to get rid of old SRM system, which was not very user friendly, quite lots of maintenance with our solution. Which is easy to use and doesn't. We did not have any major issues ever since we've gone live, and it's been more than 1 year. Yeah, that's fine. And I suppose the next thing is just that next bit, just how did that benefit the customer? Just the last thing, what did they see the benefits are, and which is meant because there'll be knock-on benefits of that. And yeah, you're right, Tina. Legislation example, send code of practice, equality, diversity, inclusion. Yeah, and that gets into social value, which is another a bigger subject. And you're absolutely right. And if you can something like send in the area that you're in, Tina, obviously aligning to those values, absolutely. But then the bigger things are diversity, inclusion. How do you do that, and how does that align with what that local authority, what their imperatives are over the next period of time? Absolutely, alignment and relevance all the way through. These are really, really, thank you so much for these responses. They're really, really good. But you can see it's about getting your head in that space. Fantastic. Thank you. So types of evidence, we've already hit on some of these, so we probably won't go through every single one. Objective evidence, accreditations, audits, customer market surveys, proof, testimonials, references, etc. Awards and press articles are really powerful when necessary. Site visits, where sometimes that will happen, that they'll want to visit the site or you visit the site, and financial guarantees when appropriate. Business evidence, case studies, operating procedures, project methodologies, things you can show. So case studies you put together yourself, but they're always based upon reality. So we can say, look, we did this. This was the. If you follow the STAR principle, for those that know it or don't know it, the STAR principle is situation, task, action, and result. And if you follow that, you don't actually have to use those 4 words. But if you approach a case study in that way and say, this is the situation, this is the task we had to do, this are the actions we took to deliver those tasks, and this was the result. And then you can do the next thing you can put is benefits, long-term benefits on there. That's a really good approach to case studies. And there's lots of support within Brandwin to help you with that. Company evidence, metrics, your kind of trust me statements, so things of like, we do this and these are the standards that we uphold. Your opinion, your customer surveys, your own marketing, obviously, your own policies, and your own CVs, which you mentioned before. But the only guidance I said, well, when it comes to policies, is only relevant ones. CVs only need to be edited to make sure they're all consistent format, because everybody does CVs different. So a consistent format, and only have the details in that are relevant to this tender. There's no point putting in things on these kind of CVs, or as we like to call them, pen portraits. Or maybe just me that calls them pen portraits. It's like a very kind of cut down CV. Only have the elements in there that are absolutely relevant to what this tender is after. There's no point putting evidence on there, or sorry, experience on there that's not relevant, not really. Sector evidence, what your standard industry procedures are. Third-party equipment, why do you use, because they may well know equipment you expected to use, depending on what it is. And your standard service approaches, kind of, your basic, your service delivery. And then your operational evidence, your process you to undertake, implement your solution, say transition, because you might be taking over from a former company delivering. What performance information do you have? What customer satisfaction data do you have? Do you do surveys and get specific feedback from your customers? Information on improvements, added value, innovations. What have you changed since your company started? What lessons have you learned, or what have you done over the last few years to improve your service? That you started well, but actually over the last 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, this is what we've done to improve our service and make our product and our service much better, and the benefits of this. And then part of that is what issues and challenges. It doesn't all have to be okay. So it's you started this business, you delivered everything from day one, everything was fantastic. And I say things you're dealing with people. This isn't like putting a CV into Indeed, has an algorithm, and if it doesn't mark the words, it kicks it out. No, in procurement departments, it's people. They're going to read this. So they want to see, where appropriate, what challenges you've overcome in order to be able to get to this position. What have you learned? What issues have you dealt with? How have you resolved them? Because that's really compelling. And so, you had these problems. Actually, now this is what we've done and it can be part of a case study, for example, that there was this particular challenge with this particular company. This is how we dealt with that challenge we haven't dealt with before, and this is how now that's influenced how we deliver to the rest of our clients because of what's happened in the past. And then commendations and positive quotes, which really go with kind of not quite testimonials, but just feedback that you might get, which you can build in. So there's a lot of things you can use. So the rules for evidence, and you've heard me say the word relevant. It's incredibly important to the bid, the client, the market, and the service. Is no point in having evidence that actually doesn't make any sense to it's completely out of context. Be as recent as possible. Really aim to have anything to do with case studies, testimonials, any kind of evidence like that as recent as possible, really within the last 12 months. It might be specific in the tender documentation that says that actually has to be within the next 12 months, the previous 12 months, but if it doesn't, I would see that as a kind of rule. Spend time developing that evidence. Make sure that it jumps off the page as much as possible. So you said, you know, that's really, really good, really strong. Include case studies, and you include this evidence as part of your planning process. In the previous webinar, we talked about having a kind of simple sheet to track your progress. You've got a date to work towards for when this tender has to be in, and you need to build in your evidence and not just answer the questions. How do you evidence what you're doing? And how do you make sure that this is a really, really compelling narrative, how it's going to be written? Golden rule. Yes, another one. Less is more. Write accurately, clearly, and concisely. Less is more. So now I'm going to say something. I'm going to slightly contradict myself. So my rule is to act like there is a tax on words, but there's no tax on paper. And what I mean by that is write clearly. Try every single word has to be there for a reason. Everything you're saying has to be there for a reason. Every piece of evidence you provide has to be there for a reason, or remove it. Better that remove something that's not relevant than have something in that's irrelevant. But also try and use white space as much as possible. So try not to cram it all together. Now, I'm saying that, and I'm going to contradict myself slightly, because every now and again on tenders, they say everything has to be on one piece of A4, which can make it quite tough if you want to put diagrams and photographs on. But there is a way around this where you can ask during the process, you can say if you have to do another sheet or graphics, you can ask if that's okay. And normally they'll say yes. What they're trying to say is, we don't want 15 pages to answer this question. We haven't got time. But less is more. Every single word that you write down there has to matter, or it shouldn't be there. So simplicity, not being simplistic, but simplicity and clarity is hard. It's the reason why copywriters are paid so much money. But you can get good at this. And one of the things we'll guide you through is to get so these things jump off the page and you're absolutely clear and you're not using kind of superlative and language that actually doesn't actually evidence what you're doing and doesn't answer the question clearly. And there's too many words there. Get to the answer really, really clearly. So you must connect. So we talked last time about having empathy with and using empathic language, so that basically you're dealing with a person. So in the center of that Venn diagram, there's a human connection. So you need to show empathy so you understand what it is they're trying to achieve. What you should be offering is to support to deliver that. It should be authentic with everything that you're saying, showing authenticity will be via your evidence. And that you share their values, that after delivering, we understand you want to deliver this. We are of the same mind. I'm not letting you use these words. Basically, you'll show you're of the same mind. You want to deliver the same thing at the same standard, at the same values that all those things. So anything else that doesn't hit one of those is a distraction. And it says make their job as easy as possible. Yeah, make it so it's a pleasure to read, whether it's on screen or whether they print it out. It's an absolute pleasure to read, and they find themselves nodding, going, yeah, this is the kind of organization that we want to work with, this kind of company we want to work with, because they understand what we want to do, what we have to do, what we've promised the electorate and those who pay council tax and the people and the children and the adults and the elderly and whatever area it is. We have promised we're going to do this. We have to do this. How do we find somebody that will deliver that understands it's not just a financial transaction, although obviously that's a big part of your business, and there's nothing wrong with that. Local authorities have no issue with companies making money, but that's not where they think. What they think is we have to spend our money wisely and deliver, and we want companies to help us deliver that. And this is why that graphic there is so important. So no double speak. Yes, the importance of precise and clear language. Never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech, which you're used to seeing in print. Yeah, don't use anything. Basically, don't be lazy. At the same time, don't try and be too clever. If you can use a short word instead of a long word, do. And one of the reasons for this is, even if you're in a technical area, you deliver a technical service. If you if there's a specific question on the technical that requires a technical answer, then give a technical, clear, concise answer. If it doesn't, don't do that. And one of the reasons is that the people you're initially working with are often the procurement department. They're not the end users of the service. So they need to understand what you are saying. And if what you're saying is buried in technical language and long-winded answers, they won't get it. And it's very, very important that they get it. So this is the reason why one of the real key things before you actually press fire on your submission is to get somebody outside your bid team or somebody outside your circle to read through this, to turn around and say, yes, I understand it. If they don't understand it, why? And see if we can reword it. Is it possible? So on the same thing, possible to take words out, always cut it out if it's possible to remove it, as long as you're not losing the purpose of that particular sentence or that paragraph. Use active language, not passive language. You know, we have done, so we will, right? That's the, you know, be strong in what you're saying. Never use a foreign phrase, scientific word, jargon, unless you can think of equivalent, unless it's absolutely necessary, absolutely completely unavoidable. Write as you speak is very, very good. I mean, you're getting, this is a personal response to something where you are getting somebody to understand what you're trying to say. So there's nothing wrong with being very clear and also quite friendly, as long as it's not, you're not wrapping it up, but you just make it so you write as you speak. Don't think you have to be clever. You have to somehow show, you know, show off your English degree, whether you have one or not. That's not the aim. It really is not the aim at all. But to contradict the whole thing, break any of those rules rather than say anything outright irrelevant. Yeah, these are guidelines. They are the rules, but they're soft rules. As long as you hit the clarity and the precision, and it's absolutely easy to understand by anybody, then you could break a lot of these rules depending on how it is that you're phrasing it, so long as you are precise, you are clear, and it's completely easy to understand without being a specialist. Okay, so we talked about passive versus active. So passive, Oliver Twist was written by Charles Dickens, 7 words. Charles Dickens wrote Oliver Twist. So that's active, stronger language, less words. And that's a really simple example. Another one, the opera singer was heckled by an onlooker in the crowd, which is passive. An onlooker in the crowd heckled the opera singer, which is active, less words, and is just stronger. Now, in a particular one or two sentences, it doesn't make that much difference, but over an entire document, it really, really does. And it's a learned skill. It is a discipline. But once you get good at it, this becomes a natural way to put something together. It's actually, generally speaking, the active is how we tend to speak. We use the passive because we think we need to write things in a particular way. And it tends to be less clear, tends to be. People are different. But this is to give you a couple of examples. So avoid jargon, avoid Americanisms. I don't actually know if that's, we all say it. I don't know whether it's a word or not. Avoid hyperboles, which, you know, over descriptive language. Hyperboles are figures of speech. Yeah, like I will literally die if you stop using. Well, we all know the word literally now has been redefined, has it not? It literally doesn't mean, so we literally don't have a word for literally anymore because it's been redefined because it's used so inaccurately most of the time. So there's an example. So avoid that kind of language. Avoid random capitalization is a good example of a really terrible sign. There's no need for well, it doesn't make any sense. Avoid that unless it's absolutely imperative. You capitalize a word. It's a proper noun, for example. Yes, we can, and yes, we will. Yeah, so we would, can, or could, or we propose to, right? Avoid those. Be absolutely positive. Brandon is running the workshop, not Brandon are running this workshop. And it's just absolute clarity. And once you get in, like I said before, once you get into the way of thinking like this, it actually becomes quite natural. But people, if you keep in mind, we said 2 slides ago about writing as you talk, your voice comes over. You'll find that you tend to use more active language than passive. It's just that people think when they need to write something, they need to change things, and you genuinely don't. So this is not necessarily something for you now, because this will take some time, but it's a thought. You will get access to these slides after this. This is an example where you could rewrite this passage to make clear and direct, reduce the number of words, but still say the same thing. So no way are we expecting this to be done now. And I'm not going to read this out, but I wouldn't mind if you would just take a second to read that paragraph. And I recently went to visit a client of ours who was putting the response together, and the language that was used was so flowery, and it was saying the right thing, but we cut it down, I think, by maybe 2/3 to answer the same question. So this is slightly convoluted. So you make it easy for them to connect. So let's look at this. Before, 61 words, and we've highlighted in red here. The reason why we've highlighted in red is because you can remove those. That says exactly the same thing as that, but that is much, much easier to understand. Like I said, you're not showing off your prowess with English, written English. Like I said, and this is going to use what seemed like a silly analogy, but the fact of the matter is, what you're trying to get across is the difference between writing for a tabloid or a broadsheet. So an article written in the Times, for example, and this is a real general thing to say, but it's just to draw a picture in your mind, will use lots of words. It'd be beautifully written. It'd be really, really interesting. You've got the time. The same story in a tabloid will have to get this across in one paragraph, normally 1-2 paragraphs, to get you to read the rest of it. And ignoring what we might think about tabloids in general, I'm just talking about the writing, the quality of the writing. It's a lot tougher or a lot more demanding to cut something down than it is to write something very verbose. So this is what you aim. That's a really good standard. Whereas this is unclear, even though it's saying the same thing. So I just wanted to bear that in mind. In writing, removing redundancy. You can see here just examples, not going to go through them all, but long versions and shorter versions. It's just, and it isn't about being lazy. In fact, if anything, sometimes the longer versions, if it are kind of lazy writing, this isn't lazy. This is working hard to deliver clarity. I said there are lots and lots of examples, and there's some great things on YouTube about clarity of writing. But we'll also, we have support through Brandoing to help you with this. But it's really, really important that you get this through in what you're trying to say. So all these in red are unnecessary. My favorite is it's mostly foreign imports. I have seen a sentence very similar to that. I'm not aware of any import that isn't foreign by definition. But yeah, avoiding all these words that actually are completely unnecessary. They don't add anything to what you're trying to say. Use fewer words. The person reading it will appreciate it. By writing accurately, positively, leanly, clearly, your reader will be more easily connect. So obviously, yeah, think about yourself. Think about how you make it as clear as possible, as lean as possible. Don't miss things out. Answer the questions in every element, of course, but try and force yourself to look, can I remove a word? Can I make that clear? Is there an alternative? So the workshop, the workshop summary. So we've tried to get through to what we're talking about is compliance to all the ITT, which is the invitation to tender, what the requirements and instructions are, remaining customer focused, using the terminology is really, really clear. It is all about them. We mentioned that in the first webinar, that it is about them. It's not about you. It's about what they need. You design a compelling solution that describes your benefits and is priced correctly. Make it really easy to evaluate by giving them to answer questions, by giving the information they need, so they don't have to ask you any other questions. Answer about why is it about why should they work with you? The proposal has immense, really high quality in the way that it's presented, in the way that it's written, and you've evidenced everything. If you hit all those marks, you will deliver an excellent, really, really high standard tendered response. And excellent responses tend to win contracts. Poor responses tend not to, as a general rule. So the final golden rule is not the taking part. No, it's the winning that matters. Absolutely. You're in this to win work. And it's something where you get, like I said before, and you sound like a broken record, but you get better at this. The more you do it, it is a learned skill. But something to bear in mind, depending on the kind of service or product you provide, etc., whatever it is, when you get really good at this, then you can lift and shift a lot of what you build something called a bid library, and you say, right, okay, so this is what we build. These are our case studies. This is the evidence that we have. This is our value proposition. And then actually, you don't have to start from scratch. You do start from scratch now, but as you do more of this, so it's worth the effort once you get over the hump and you can respond to multiple tenders. Very important. So the program schedule, just so we are here, April 16th, with me. And then we have on the 14th of May, we have the third of these, which is writing public sector bids and tenders, which goes into a bit more process detail. We talk about the documentation. We talk about some of the words and things, acronyms that are used, so that you understand more about what's going on. When you see these things, you've understood it's quite detailed, a little bit more heavy going, I suppose, although I do try and make it as light as possible. But that is a really compelling thing to go into, so you understand now when you see phrases used, that you understand what it's. So thank you, Charlie, for saying it's been great. Thank you very much. So, and then there's the later on, there's a whole series here. You've got other things being delivered here. So for different areas. So this is a full program of events that you will be invited to. All the ones I suggest you attend as many things as you possibly can. The Meet the Buyer event on the 23rd of May these are fantastic opportunities to get in front of people, to ask questions and meet the people that actually deliver these contracts, or rather write these contracts. And so you understand, you build a relationship up. It's really invaluable. So I really compel you to make the time to attend as many of these as you can. I'll just get this to work. So just quickly, as part of your one-to-one tender advice session, you'll have a participant action plan. You have 2 sessions, 1.5 hours each, plus your action card. This is what you'll end up with. You'll have a real clear A4 about how you approach this. It's a really valuable document when it's completed. So go to your one-to-ones, give it your all. It's a real opportunity to build something compelling for your business. Like I said, a lot of what we talked about today has been general. We said the Meet the BR environment, 23rd of May in 24, so not far away. And it says there, like unprecedented access to decision makers for Hillingdon Council and local anchor institution, means large buyers. Almost impossible to get in front of these companies, these organizations, and the procurement people, because they're all so busy. So don't miss this opportunity. So go to Fit to Bid. Fill in the online capability assessment, attend the skills webinars you've done too, agree an action plan, participate. This is all about taking advantage of what is available to you. Let me just go back a slide. It's all here for you. It's a marvelous program, and there has been real benefits for companies that have actually gone through this, and that could be for you as well. So again, just to submit, you register for your skills program, you book a one-to-one advice session. Charlie there will help you with that. You should submit your and develop a winning bid. So all these, that's an expression of interest, or EOI, which is the next stage, or the first stage in any tender response. So make the most of this. I do hope that this has been of value to you. All right, so thank you, Charlie. Right, so Charlie's number's there. Charlie will be doing the one-to-ones with them all, so please contact Charlie as soon as possible. The number's there, so we can arrange that. Again, a fabulous resource. Remember, these ones are about you, about making the situation as good for you as possible. So that's what this whole program is about. So I've hoping that you found this really valuable and interesting. It is a big subject, and there's a lot more to talk about. I'm just going to give you a minute. You're welcome, Vivara. Once again, I do hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If there's anybody wants to add any quick questions in there, otherwise I'm just going to give it 30 seconds and we'll sign off. Thank you so much for joining us today. And like I said, just to repeat, contact Charlie on that phone number, arrange your one-to-one, and make it so. You're very welcome, everybody. Right. Thank you very much. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you.